The graph also shows the cumulative level of savings, or looking at this point, the 12-month percent level of savings at 11.0%. That drastic improvement in May conservation was able to result in a 1.9% increase from our May level of savings. In addition to seeing our statewide levels increase for May, we also saw the residential gallons per capita per day, or the RGPCD, decrease, indicating that although it did get warmer, people were able to reduce their individual water usage. There was a larger range in total, meaning both indoor and outdoor residential water use in May. The highest RGPCD was in Colorado River Hydrologic Basin with 348 gallons per person per day, while the lowest RGPCD was in the San Francisco Bay at 39 gallons per person per day. The lowest was the Westboro Water District.
South San Francisco.
The average statewide RGPCD for May was 87.5, which is a reduction from the 90.5 that we reported for April. Again, these numbers account for both total, or both indoor and outdoor water use. There is a performance standard of 55 gallons per person per day for indoor use alone. Of the 400 suppliers that reported for May, 33 of them were able to achieve a total RGPCD of less than 55 gallons per day, which means that 2.6 million people were reporting using that much water. This slide shows the gallons per capita per day by hydrologic region in blue, and the percent reduction in total water production by hydrologic region for May as compared to 2013 in purple. The hydrologic regions are ranked from left to right, with the regions with the lowest percent reduction or the least amount of water saved on the left, and the level of savings increasing as you move towards the right. As I said, we do have that indoor performance standard of 55 gallons per person per day. 3 regions, the North Coast, the Central Coast, and the San Francisco Bay, were within spitting distance of that 55 gallons target. Additionally, I want to bring your attention to the May conservation efforts of the Colorado River and the South Coast hydrologic regions. Although it has the lowest level of savings for May by hydrologic region, the Colorado River did achieve its highest level of savings to date at 21%, which is almost double the region's conservation that they've reported in any of the previous months. The South Coast region, which represents approximately 56% of the state's total population, jumped from 8.9% conservation in April to 25.7% conservation in May, which provided a significant boost to the state's overall conservation number. Additionally, those conservation efforts in the South Coast led to them reporting an average RGPCD of 81 gallons, which is 9 fewer gallons of water used per person per day for the South Coast region. In addition to reporting monthly water use, urban water suppliers are also required to report on outdoor irrigation restrictions and their compliance and enforcement efforts. May is the second full month of the enforcement and compliance statistics. Along with the water conservation data, the enforcement data is also available on our website. The March 27th emergency regulation required all urban water suppliers that had not already restricted the number of days per week that outdoor irrigation with potable water was allowed to do so by May 11th. The suppliers could either amend their water shortage contingency plan to include a local restriction or adopt the state backstop restriction of no more than 2 days per week outdoor irrigation with potable water. The grace period for implementing those outdoor restrictions did pass on May 11th, and so our hope was to see all of the urban suppliers enforcing these outdoor restrictions for this data period. Unfortunately, 60% of the suppliers reported that no restrictions on the number of days per week outdoor irrigation is allowed.
60 of them, yeah, not 60%, but
Sorry,
still,
sorry,
60 is a
60
lot.
total.
So what are your next steps on that?
Well, first of all, I think that we had possibly a checkbox issue where some of the suppliers seemed to report that they didn't have restrictions, but then in the notes field did seem to indicate that they had some restrictions. So we're going to have to look through the numbers more, and I think that 60 may go down. But also in terms of what are we going to do about it, the regulation that the board adopted on May 5th that we're waiting for June to begin with the conservation standards has superseded this requirement. So we set the performance standard for the upcoming months as opposed to the specific actions. But certainly if somebody is far off of their performance standard and failed also to do what they were supposed to do under the previous iteration of the regulation, I imagine the board would be a little less lenient in that situation. So we're going to keep track of the information.
All right, so it may be a little early, but figuring it out. But so if I understand it, this would be a candidate for your conservation order provision.
That's right. So for our enforcement approach, which I'll talk about a little bit later, we would, if one of these 60 or however many it is that actually don't restrict the number of days per week that outdoor irrigation is allowed, as David said, if they're off the mark and we have to engage with them on additional compliance, additional steps they can take to bump up their conservation percentage, this is an obvious target because restricting the number of days per week that outdoor irrigation is allowed, we know is correlated with decreasing use.
In addition to outdoor irrigation restrictions, the water suppliers also showed a significant enforcement response as well as a public involvement in terms of trying to conserve water. The suppliers received over 28,000 water waste complaints that were submitted to 346 of those 400 suppliers. In response to those complaints or by additional supplier enforcement activities, over 36,000 formal warnings for water waste were issued for May. Both of these numbers are a significant improvement over significant level of effort that was shown in April. And a third of those formal warnings were actually issued by one supplier, the Eastern Municipal Water District in the South Coast. Lastly, almost 1,800 penalties were issued by 49 suppliers, which is more than double the number of penalties that were issued in April. Collectively, these compliance and enforcement numbers indicate a high level of local activity to respond to reports of leaks and suspected water wasting. I also want to highlight the fact that the city of Fresno reported the highest number of complaints received at almost 3,000 and issued the most penalties for any supplier at just over 1,000, and they were the second in terms of issuing formal warnings only to the Eastern Municipal Water District.
The results are pretty impressive.
It is. That level of enforcement, educating the public, correlated with a 33% savings for the city of Fresno.
So you can see here 10 of the districts that over the last year that we've been tracking, so that's June of last year through May of this year, have achieved 20% or higher savings along with per person per day usage of 75 gallons or less. And we chose to highlight this list because 20% is what the governor called for last year voluntarily. So these are districts that met that, and not only met it, but also at a really low per person per day usage.
Right, and remind everyone why that's significant.
It's significant because when you have lower per person per day usage, that's generally indoor usage. And it's the outdoor usage which we know can be reduced without significant impacts to, human welfare. So when we see those low numbers, we know people are cutting back on that outdoor irrigation, not watering the lawn, and helping us meet our goals.
Also, they're starting from a lower per capita amount, and so not only are they achieving the percent reduction goals, but they started at a lower amount to begin with, and it's very notable.
It is notable. It is also worth mentioning that, as you can see from this list, these are almost all coastal communities, so they have the advantage of the cooler weather to begin with. That's not to say that there aren't inland communities that have made great strides as well. So this is just another way to look at where we are going forward. We've set up the tiers, and you can see them there, and you can see how many of the water suppliers of these 400 suppliers are in each tier, and then what's the population associated with each tier. And what I want to note about this is there's been a lot of attention on those sort of top tiers, the 32% in particular, and the 36%. As a fraction of the state's population, it's fairly small. Most of the population is in sort of the middle grouping. You can see the biggest chunk in the 16% tier, due primarily to the fact that that's where LADWP is. That's 40% of that tier. And then, the 20 and 24% tiers as well. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done across the state to meet these conservation standards. But the majority of the population, to meet their standard, it's a matter of 20%, and we know that's achievable. So what you're looking at here is what has been achieved again for the last year. So as if we already had these regulations in place over the last year. So you're looking at June of last year through May of this year, and with the tiers that have been imposed, who's made it, who's somewhat close, and who's far away. Now, again, this is over the last year of data, so what you can see is that half the state, in terms of population, over the last year has already been in compliance with what is now required June forward. And that bottom chunk, it's a large number of suppliers, but it's not a huge number of people. And that's, again, over the last year when statewide we've had a cumulative savings rate of 11%.
And actually, I just want to make a quick correction. The supplier achieved conservation standard is actually supposed to be 4.1 million people, while the suppliers more than 10% away from the conservation standard should be 18.3 million people. So the population number should be switched.
I flipped it. That's right. It doesn't look as good when you look at over the past year. But when we look at May, it looks a lot better. So what you're looking at here, there are three things, right? There's the month, this is May 2015 levels of savings, so what we've just seen. And then the three categories, the suppliers that are on track, suppliers that are within 10%, and suppliers that are over 10%. And this is a much rosier picture. Because what you see there up at the top is not only do we have the bulk of the suppliers having made it, but that's the bulk of the population. That's over 80% of the population is within a serviced area of a water supplier where they're all, as of May, as of last month, or May, it's now July, they're already on track. So if we keep this up, all those suppliers are going to be meeting their standard. And then you have a group of about 100 that are within 10%. Most of that group is smaller suppliers. And then it's a very small group, only 29 and less than 1.5 million people that are sort of way off, given where they were in May. So this is just a 1-month snapshot. But again, if we keep up the May savings, and this extends through the summer, it's going to really show that Californians are doing what needs to be done. We're meeting the target for the most part, and we have a much smaller group of people and suppliers that we have to work with to get them up to the mark.
All right, this is the we can do this slide.
This is the we can do this slide. Okay. So this is our school fundraising graph. You can see we're not selling candy bars, right? But yeah, the thermometer is the graphic that we've landed upon to track the savings going forward. And of course, we'll start in just another week when we get the June data in on July 15th. And that'll be our first month of tracking the compliance with the 25% mandate. There's been a lot of questions and interest in, how are we going to respond to the suppliers that are off the mark? And the first thing to note is we are going to respond immediately. As soon as we look at that data and we figure out who's off the mark, we're going to immediately get in touch with those suppliers and start requesting information, and in some cases, setting up times to really go through step by step, what are they doing, what more can they be doing. So in the case that we mentioned earlier with the suppliers that don't have restrictions on the number of days of the week that outdoor irrigation is allowed, that'll be one of the first things we take up with them, right? Well, you're not making it, but you're allowing outdoor irrigation maybe 4 days per week. That can come down. That won't be the only thing, but that's one prime example. For this next reporting period, we also added some fields so that the suppliers can tell us what categories of actions they're taking to comply. So whether it's reducing days of the week, putting specific restrictions on types of uses, doing something with rates, doing more on fixing leaks, augmenting rebate programs, water audits, the whole sort of toolbox, we want to know what steps they're taking so we can track that. So again, on enforcement, the tools we have are listed up on the slide there. And then just briefly, the level of sort of enforcement action here is really going to depend on case-specific factors, and I've listed just a few of them up there. Again, I mean, certainly for a supplier that is, say, 2 or 3% away from its target, we're going to have a different approach than a supplier that is 13% or more away from its target. So that's a big factor. And then, of course, just looking at what they already have in place, what their capabilities are. We'll go through and use those tools up above to make sure that they're doing everything that needs to be done to try to make that goal.
Matchmaking with other communities that are similar that are doing much better.
That's right. And one of the reasons we're now having the reporting on all the different actions that are taken is we can then go look and see, well, your next door community, their rebate levels for appliances or their turf rebates are, twice the size of yours. So can we bridge that gap? Tomorrow, there's going to be a rates and pricing workshop held here. This is our first major step in complying with Directive Number 8 from the Governor's April 1 executive order, which directed the board to work with other state agencies and local agencies to see what additional actions can be taken to increase the effectiveness and use of conservation rates and pricing. So it's not just about rates, it's about all the different pricing mechanisms that can be brought to bear to really send appropriate price signals to customers about their water use. We know that good pricing signals can really have a significant effect on conservation rates, upwards of 15% in a number of studies. So that's tomorrow, 9 until 3 to 4 in the afternoon, depending on public comment.
Optimist.
I'm an eternal optimist. And then the other things listed here are just the other classes of activities we have going on to implement this regulation that you all decided on as part of the package that was approved in May. So we've got 4 requests for alternate compliance that have been submitted. These are communities that feel that because of some special circumstance, the types of customers that they have that simply aren't able to reduce, that they may need an alternate compliance mechanism because there's no feasible way for them to meet their conservation standard. We're reviewing those as I speak. We have made determinations on the requests that have been submitted for inclusion in the 4% reserve tier. Again, that was a very narrow category created for communities that met specific criteria and really had an excess of water supply. We've been receiving certifications of commercial agriculture. That was included as a step required step in the regulation. And then we are putting together a plan for the working group, which was also included in the board's resolution to deal with a number of issues that will be relevant if dry conditions continue. So we've got many balls in the air, but the main message is we are really pleased that the level of conservation jumped up so high in May that people are getting the message. It's really nice to be able to come up here and deliver good news for a change.
That's definitely great. Can you tell me a little bit more? You don't have to tell the specifics, but what are the nature of the alternative compliance requests? Is it like there's one big business in the area and it's food processing and they can't cut? That was one of the examples we got. What are they falling into a group? Or are they apples, oranges, peaches, and pears?
They're an apple, an orange, a peach, and a pear. So we've got one that has to do with prisons, one that has to do with a large petroleum refinery, one that has to do with food processing, and another that has to do with a power plant.
Right, so these are just you can't get there from here.
They all use water.
And again, we're evaluating, one of the things we're going to do with these is we're going to look at, again, what are all the actions they have in place? How much water are we talking about? What can be reduced in other sectors besides those customers? Do those customers really have no opportunity whatsoever to conserve? So we're going through all of these questions as part of our evaluation.
And I assume, at least from my experience in wandering around to various agencies, leak detection is increasingly a piece of low-hanging fruit that industries or that communities can take advantage of. And so I would think these industries would also be good candidates for that.
Absolutely. As we've talked about before, there are sort of 2 classes of leak detection. There's leaks that occur in the water supplier's distribution system in their own pipes, and then there are leaks that occur at the customer premises. And that can be anything from a swimming pool leak to a toilet leak to the pipe leak within a house or building. And there are opportunities to reduce all of those leaks. And there are increasing private sector efforts to help utilities and customers identify and fix leaks.
I just have to speak from personal experience here. I sit there and I listen to the toilet and I think, oh, it's fine. Did the food color thing. Walked away, 20 minutes later, tank had color in it. But for $10 with a new flap or silicone and my husband feeling very manly, Leak is plugged, put the food color in, went away for a few hours, and it was fine. So a simple thing where I thought I was on it, I wasn't. So I don't want to run on food color, out at the grocery stores, but I highly recommend it with a very simple fix.
Absolutely. It's such a great example of what can be done that doesn't affect anything. I mean, you don't have to take a shorter shower. You don't have to fix the irrigation system. These things need to happen too. But just that simple thing of putting food coloring in the toilet can save a tremendous amount of water.
KCAA, a radio station in the San Gabriel Valley, is doing a contest where if you have to write in why you want to keep your lawn. And if you do the best one, you get a new high-efficient sprinkler system. They have lots of tips on that station for what to do on their water program every Thursday night.
The amount of creativity out there in responding has really been impressive. Everyone's really gotten into this, and it's nice to see and hear the stories coming back about different campaigns and social media and people's competitions, as well as the main supplier actions.
It is notable. Was there a deadline on alternate compliance proposals, or is that an ongoing?
That's an ongoing process. We have received 4 to date, and we will be making determinations about those in the near future. But there's no deadline for submitting those types of requests, so we may receive more.
Resolution number 16 discussion we had. And then, regarding tomorrow's workshop, you mentioned the signal for, getting effective conservation that pricing can create. But there's this other side of the coin. Are the conservation measures really having a significant fiscal impact on local water providers? And will that also be part of our discussion tomorrow?
Yes, it will. In fact, we're going to have a whole panel that really focuses on the balancing act between making sure that rates are affordable, particularly for those on the lowest part of the income spectrum, making sure that they achieve conservation goals, and making sure that they keep the water suppliers staffed and running. So that balancing act, that's exactly what we'll be hearing about tomorrow, and I expect a robust discussion.
Dealing with the fixed costs of making water available. Thanks.
We have one speaker without even being asked this time, David Boland from the Association of California Water Agencies. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chair Marcus and board members. David Boland, Association of California Water Agencies. I just wanted to underscore the optimism that I think the water industry as a whole is experiencing. However, with the glass half empty idea that May was a pretty unseasonable May, particularly in the South Coast, and we're not going to be able to bank necessarily on the monsoonal moisture throughout the summer. So I think everybody is battening down the hatches, and we are in for a difficult ride in most areas in terms of trying to make those targets. So with that in mind, we at ACWA, the Association of California Water Agencies, has prepared this toolkit that I wanted to just underscore the availability of this toolkit. It's available not only to our member agencies, but all kinds of water agencies, small ones as well as large ones. And it includes a whole bunch of different things, including a bunch of information on the drought conditions and statistics, some of which was lifted from the series of webinars that we were conducting with the administration last month. We gleaned a lot of good information from that and put it in a pretty prominent location. The webinars themselves are still available, and of course the slideshows have a lot of good information on some funding programs and some other initiatives that are out there. We also have a drought response action checklist, and so it's just literally a list of things that agencies can do and that we recommend they do to try to roll into action on some of this stuff. And as has been kind of underscored in the staff report, there are a lot of different fronts on which agencies can move in terms of outreach to the customers, focusing primarily on outdoor irrigation. We have a lot of information about that. Again, we link back to Save Our Water, which Aqua is a administrator of with the Department of Water Resources. And the Save Our Water site's going through a substantial remake and focusing its message like a laser on this issue of outdoor irrigation and the idea of do you really need your lawn? Can you let it go? Can you let it go brown? Things like the toilet flap idea and lots of other consumer-oriented tips for conservation in California. And so we want to underscore the linkage to Save Our Water and the fact that we're encouraging our water agencies and others to link to Save Our Water directly so that if your customers go to your website, they can go very easily and immediately back to Save Our Water and find that good information. We also have a bunch of talking points on there about the drought and the effects of the drought around the state and information about myths, I guess, about the drought, as well as facts on how the water system works in California and facts about the value of water. This issue of water pricing is a very complex and charged issue, and we have some good information on that on the website as well. And then just the issue of new development and drought has been somewhat controversial in a lot of areas, and we have a little fact sheet on how water agencies in some parts of the state are dealing with new development during the drought. And then just a link back to this Water Board's website here on the emergency regulations and the portal in terms of reporting. So we're just encouraging water agencies to use those resources. And we're in this mode now of trying to be helpful, I guess, and trying to field issues and concerns. We've had several smaller agencies that have asked about their role, and we appreciate the staff's responsiveness in terms of emails, being able to forward questions and have a real fine-grained response back, as well as with agencies that are inquiring about how they can use or should they use some of these tools that were mentioned, the 4% tier and some of the other tiers. And we're trying to, I guess, empower those agencies to use the tools they need to show their compliance with the targets. So that concludes my comments. Oh, the other thing, very important thing, is that we have this gallery. It's a whole new communications tool. I guess if you're into Pinterest or whatever, I'm not, but our communications people are very keen on this. And we're asking our water agencies to populate this thing with very cool pictures and graphics. It's basically self-published information. This gallery is on our website. And what it does is it links directly to what these different water agencies are doing in terms of conservation and drought response. And it's pretty amazing as to the diversity of approaches that water agencies have, and even the cool graphics that they put up there. So I would encourage you on your, when you want some entertainment and some new ideas, that this gallery is a great source for at least over 50 water agencies that are on it now, and we're really promoting it in a big way to get our water agencies to publish their stuff on there. And that is the one thing that you have to be a member of Aqua to put anything up on the gallery, but we encourage membership as well.
Right, but anybody can take a look. Are those all images
Absolutely.
people
No,
can
that's
use
accessible to
then
the-
in their PowerPoints and the like without?
Yeah, all of that is available right on our website, acwa.com.
That's great, and saveourwater.com is the website that you were talking about that everybody can go to. One question I think we've talked about, and I saw one ad, one of the issues we've had, it's just hard to message because it's a nuanced message, which is, focus on putting the lawn on a serious water diet, but for heaven's sakes, water the trees.
Yes.
And I know I saw some banners that you had done. Is that something that you're getting some play for? Because it is really important that we not lose our trees. That's what we should be using the water on.
Yeah.
Just because of the climate change, heat island effect, just also public safety, you don't want trees falling on them.
Yes, there are a number of tools and fact sheets available, and we've linked to on this idea of taking care of and deep watering those trees. However, we are getting, reports, people are losing trees or big damage, tree limbs coming down on power lines. I had a personal experience. My daughter was babysitting, the big tree limb hit their house. It brought in, SMUD had to come out and lift the limb off the lines. And in the conversation, apparently the SMUD folks were saying that they've gotten a lot more calls in just the last little while because trees are starting to kind of reach a point in which they sort of get very brittle and break up. So again, it's pretty obvious if you look at your trees when they're in stress, particularly redwoods, which don't really belong here in Sacramento, but there are a lot of them, and they need their water. So we are encouraging folks, particularly public agencies that are dealing with the median prohibition, to try to keep the trees alive in the medians. And this is an opportunity, of course, to think about what trees you have, and if you can get some native oaks planted as opposed to more dry or more water demanding trees, that's a good thing too. But we want to try to save the tree canopy we have, and that's part of the cooling effect in California in general, in our communities here in the Central Valley particularly.
In addition to the information on tree irrigation during the drought that's available at saveourwater.com, there's also some documentation on the Water Board's conservation page under the resources tab. It provides links to several guidance documents for various climatic regions throughout the state.
I would say cut back on lawn watering, save the trees, flush responsibly, look responsibly, and look for leaks. That cover it, the big ones? Great, thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
The partnership. All right, well, with that, we'll take a 15-minute break before we get into the rest of our agenda. I suspect we will definitely go through lunch, and so I'll look to suggestions from my colleagues as to what time and for how long. And I'll announce that when we come back.